Hello, this is going to be a video lesson overviewing our Egyptian love poetry. Now, if you recall last week, we looked at Hymn to the Sun, which was a religious hymn written by Akhenaten, Amenhotep IV, and it was written during the New Kingdom time period. Now, that was during the Armenia time period, but we're going to be looking at another segment of time period within the New Kingdom, which was the Ramessid time period. And again, that was named after the Ramesses pharaohs. Now, as far as the poems we're looking at, we don't know the authors of these love poems, but we do know that they are from that particular time period. So they're close in relationship to Hymn to the Sun. Now, as far as the PowerPoint that I have, I'm going to be referencing during the video right now. If you want to go to week 14 and then look below essentially module 17, you're going to notice that it's letter C, and we're looking at slides 18 to 21. Now you're going to notice right here, this is the same PowerPoint as last week, but we're looking at different slides in this slideshow. Now, as I mentioned in the lesson last time, we are lucky as, of course, modern readers to still have this literature, to take a glimpse back at Egyptian history. Most of these poems were found, again, on papyri paper, which, again, was preserved because of that dry desert terrain in Egypt. Also on pieces of pottery and broken pieces of pottery, the ostraka. Now, as far as this poem, very similar to the Hymn to the Sun poem, this would be a poem that is lyrical, meaning it's set to music, which is very, again, similar to our Greek and Roman poems that we looked at. Now, also similar to Hymn to the Sun, you're going to see that imagery dealing with the Nile, crops, nature, such as animals and plant life, those are very prominent in the Egyptian love poems as well. Now, as far as the love poetry, you're going to be surprised. Some of the poems are very chaste, innocent. Others are very erotic, okay? There is going to be a metaphor later with a red fish, and it's not a red fish, if you get my drift, okay? Now, as far as the speaker, sometimes the speaker may be a male speaker or a female speaker, so we get to see both sides of love from an Egyptian perspective, okay? Now, as far as Egyptians' perception of sex, now, I do want to offer you a wider glimpse of that. If you go to, of course, our modules page, there is a whole video. Now, this is from National Geographic. It's a long video, but it's really interesting. I found it fascinating. If you look at letter D, Sex in Ancient Egypt, National Geographic, it's going to take you to YouTube, and this is a National Geographic video that discusses ancient Egypt's perceptions of sex and sexuality. It was a huge aspect of their culture and their religious belief systems. Now, I think normally when you think of Egypt's history, you probably don't automatically go straight to sexuality, but Egypt had a very healthy perception of sexuality. It was not a taboo by any means. It was a part of their religious belief system. Just for example, some Egyptians believed that the creation of the world was instigated by the sun god, and it was actually created asexually from himself. He would have therefore masturbated, okay, and would have created two other gods, Shu and also Teferet. Now, there is actually a picture of this act, which I'm not going to show it on this video, but if you want to find that image, you can search very likely on Google this description and find that image, which would have been an artwork that possibly would have been on a temple wall during this time period. So again, think of Egyptians' perceptions of sex. It wasn't taboo. It was considered a part of life, a part of nature, and a part of the religious belief system. Now, again, they were matter of fact. It was openly discussed. And also, erotic matters, they were often displayed, as I mentioned, in temples, tombs, statues. There's actually a very widely known one that's mentioned in the documentary I recommended, and it's the Turin Erotic Papyrus. Now, it was controversial at the time when it was written because it did depict a monarch, okay, which that was considered disrespectful. But that idea of sex, its presentation of it, was not the taboo. The taboo was that it was a monarch being presented in sexual acts. So I don't want you to think later when we discuss the Asian Indian poems and they do address the Kama Sutra, that's not anything exclusive to that culture. You're going to see that in the Turin Erotic Papyrus, there were very vivid detailed artistic images, reenactments of sexual acts, but they in many ways they were referenced to the gods. So I want you to understand kind of the connection between those two things. Now you're going to notice I do have several poems for you to read for today. Now as far as the Egyptian poems, I want you to look at Love, How I'd Love to Slip Down to the Pond, and also Love of You is Mixed Deep in My Vitals. You also have another assigned poem from the textbook, and that textbook poem is My God, My Lotus, and that's pages 29 to 30. Now, when you click on letter B, you're going to notice that you have the two poems that are assigned to read. When you click on that, you're going to see here are our poems. Now you're going to notice Love, How I Love to Slip Down to the Pond. It's very much so full of imagery, also full of metaphor. I mean, this particular poem is dripping with eroticism, and also this is that infamous love poem that has the metaphor of the red fish, which is not a red fish. You're going to get very quickly that is a metaphor for male genitalia, okay? Now, as far as the other poem, and again, this first poem's likely written from a perspective the speaker is a female. Then we have a second poem. This particular poem, we don't know if the speaker is male or female. It actually could be either. Now, as far as Love of You is Mixed Deep in My Vitals, this is not necessarily sexual, erotic in nature. It's more in offering sort of an exclamation of the emotions that are felt in anticipation of seeing someone you love. This might be someone you're actually in a relationship with, or maybe someone you have a crush on, because hey, I've had those before in my lifetime, those crushes that are fleeting and you feel the emotions just tangling up in you. And I just stole tangle from that last line. But again, you feel that. Now, there is this image of girls' love longing that could make the speaker female. But on the other hand, this could be a male speaker saying that he's acting like a young girl in love. So I just want you to understand, as far as these two particular poems, we have two very different tones. The first poem, of course, very erotic and sexual and passionate in nature, and the second one very innocent and more caught up in the emotional aspects of love rather than the physical aspects, in a sense. Now you're going to notice the textbook poem. The textbook poem is My God, My Lotus. This is actually a different translation and different version of the first poem, which the first poem in this version is Love, How I'd Love to Slip Down to the Pond. The third poem is My God, My Lotus. This is very similar to this particular poem, Love, How I'd Love to Slip Down to the Pond, because it's a different translation. But also what's cool about the translation in the textbook is you have two different perspectives. You have the female perspective first, which is very close, of course, to this translation on the handout that I gave you. But also on the next page, you'll notice you have the male perspective. So you have two lovers' perspectives in this very passionate, intimate moment. So I wanted you to have both of these versions just to show how different certain translations can be. I've taught so long in the last, 17 years that we go through different world literature textbooks. Some translations of poems are better than others, but in some cases a different translation can give you a different perspective, and that's one reason I'm giving you two different versions. First with Love, How I'd Love to Slip Down to the Pond, but also with that My God, My Lotus, which is in the textbook, because these are very different versions based on the author's translations, which I thought you might find interesting. Now, as far as these poems, please appreciate them as far as a glimpse into Egypt's culture, not just their perceptions of sexuality, but also their religious belief systems, and also just their perspectives of interaction in respect to just that romantic feeling, whether it's innocent love or if it's passionate erotic love. Hopefully you will enjoy these particular poems, and on the next video we're going to be discussing the Asian Indian poems. Thank you.